Namaste. We will resume our study of happiness in this part 3. We will study more insights into happiness. So here I would like to give you some ideas from the Upanishads on happiness. The Mandukya Upanishad is a very small Upanishad but most profound. And there they are discussing consciousness and happiness of the highest degree. So how do they exactly do it? What is the methodology and what is the special technique, you can say, of the Mandukya Upanishad? It is the Avasthatraya Vichar, which you must have heard already. But briefly, it is about analyzing the 3 states of waking, dream and deep sleep. Why are they analyzing these 3 states? In order to understand the entire gamut of human experience and to understand some basic facts which we overlook. The most obvious things in life we overlook. So through this analysis, they are pointing out to certain very profound facts about your own experience. It's your everyday experience. Please see the state of waking, the state of dream, and the state of deep sleep. So I don't think any other science or philosophy has even studied the state of deep sleep the way they have done. But here they are giving us some very, very important ideas through this. See, in the waking state, your senses are active and the mind is active. And you are collecting information, you are processing it, and you are knowing, thinking, understanding, feeling. In the dream state, when you fall asleep and when you go into a dream state, it can be a different you. In the sense, you may be wearing a different body and mind. Your sense of I is the same always, but you may be in a different body. You may have become the personality whom you like very much. So in a sense, these states are mutually exclusive of each other, where a common I persists, but you may be wearing a different body and mind. And deep sleep state is even still more different. But for now, let's concentrate on the Swapnavastha, the dream. There you see, in the dream state, your senses are shut. But the mind, the subconscious mind is active. And it is manufacturing your dream. It is spinning your dream. And in the dream state, there are very many interesting things because as I told you, you may have a totally different personality, but your sense of being persists. It is the same always. And you spin up a dream and it appears absolutely real to you, to the dreamer, until you wake up. So, dream is Jagrat for the dreamer. Isn't this true? How your mind is capable of this, please see. And you may have all sorts of emotions also in the dream. You may actually sweat physically by what you are seeing in the dream, or you may be very joyous in the dream. So you pass through a whole range of thought and emotion in the dream. And you may have a different personality altogether in the dream. But your sense of existence, I, remains the same. So that is why the rishis gave a different name altogether to the waker, dreamer and deep sleeper. The waker was called Vishwa, the dreamer, the one who sees the dream, was called Tejasa, and the deep sleeper was called Prajna. Now in the state of deep sleep, what happens is the senses are shut, the mind is also shut. Yet, you covet this state. Why? You experience something. What is it that you feel? And in that state, you feel deep restfulness, peacefulness, happiness. Sukha maham asvapsam na kinchid vedisham. I did not know anything, but I had a peaceful, restful sleep. I slept like a log, we say. And we covet that state. You see the amount of preparation we do to get a good night's deep sleep. We drink hot milk, we prepare a good bedding and mattress and everything, room heater, whatever is required. So that we may drop the mind. So you see, you experience deep level restfulness and happiness even when you drop the mind. So this they are pointing you towards. That so then happiness must lie even beyond the mind. It is not restricted to your mind activity. In fact, transcendental joy is beyond the mind. Its source is the self. Because consciousness always persists. Otherwise, who recorded that the mind was shut? That there was no thought? There was no feeling? Who recorded that? So the deep sleeper, the prajna, recorded that. Which means you were there as awareness, and this is not an inference. It is your experience every night. But it is so subtle that you don't understand it in the Jagrat waking state because the mind has become overactive. So it cannot catch that subtlety. But the fact is, you were very much present to record the absence of experience. It is not experience of absence. I mean, it is experience of the absence of objective activity. Isn't it? It is, you have experienced the absence of objects, the absence of thoughts. But it has been an experience of deep sleep to you. That is why you feel restful and happy after sleep, after a good night's sleep. So this fact is very important to understand this much, that the source of pure happiness lies even beyond the mind. It lies beyond the mind. So where? In the self. The real nature of the self is consciousness and bliss. And consciousness is synonymous with existence. Existence is equal to consciousness is equal to bliss. In this slide, where exactly does happiness come from? So this is the profound and mind-boggling logic of Mandukya Upanishad, that happiness then, the supreme, complete happiness, is independent of object, independent even of mind, and happiness results from something behind the mind, which is the self. Now, I don't know how many of you will take this completely, because a certain amount of in-depth, conscious experience of the deep sleep state is required in order to understand this completely. This again comes only by practice, the practice of sadhana. Because in deep sleep, it appears like I did not know anything. But in the state of full yoga, you are in a state of full awareness without thought. And you experience deep peacefulness. Awareness is, you can say, equivalent to a state of deep blissfulness. So when you get a first-hand experience of it, not through deep sleep, but through sadhana, then you understand what a great conclusion Mandukya Upanishad is making. When you have awakened to the knowledge of the self, you understand the deepest level of bliss possible. So our Upanishads are constantly talking about this level of happiness. And compared to this, every other form of happiness is delusion, they will say. It is lower, it is a delusive form of, in a sense, our mind is fooling us. So as I had told you, they have analyzed it like this, that happiness is the inherent nature of the self, but it gets superimposed on the mind. And I have put those steps there. Please see. When it gets superimposed on the mind, it's a kind of adhyas, you can say, a kind of superimposition. First of all, the mind reflects this awareness, so the mind appears to be happy, and we search the source of happiness in the mind because of this adhyas. Further on, you superimpose the happiness of the mind on the object. It's a further extension of adhyas, and you start giving credit to the object. So you will focus on drawing more and more objects into your life. Isn't it? This is the normal state of mind. You see, that is why people, even if they have 2 or 3 homes, they will still want more property, more homes. Even if they have so much of whatever, jewelry, huge money in the bank account, they will want to accumulate more and more. Why this tendency? Because they feel proportionately their happiness will increase. But fundamentally, we should know this. I'm not saying you don't require these things. Bring into your life as much as you require. But fundamentally, you should know happiness is proportional to awareness and not to objects. And this is a kind of, that is why these equations have been put there, that your inner awareness, when it gets reflected in your mind appears to be happy. And you start thinking the mind is happy. That is why I'm happy. And further on, it gets superimposed on the object and you start loving the object. And naturally, you will start collecting more and more objects in your life. Now, Vedanta also gives another beautiful insight here. It says, you see, how is it that this form of desire deludes us into this understanding? Any strong desire in your mind will sort of deflect knowledge. In what sense? When there is a desire in the mind, there is an agitation. Now, when an object comes into your life, the agitation is quelled to a certain extent, and you gain back the inherent peace of your mind, and so you attribute happiness to the object. But in the first place, the desire which created the agitation was created in your mind. So when you throw more light on this happening in our mind, which is constant, then you understand how it is that knowledge gets deflected through desire. So then you will understand that these upsurges in our mind, which are actually only demands for more and more joy, how these are to be overcome through proper discipline. They are to be overcome through proper clarity of understanding, discipline, through yoga basically, and not through indulgence. The more you indulge, the more you get into the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is a common experience which says that pleasure beyond a certain point only results in revulsion. But you will keep coming back to that unless you taste something higher. Once you taste something higher, you will try to hold on to that and try to maximize that in your experience. So entirely this research depends upon the practice of yoga. Because if you are not getting higher forms of happiness, you will invest in the lower. This is the nature of the human mind. So that is why all of these conclusions of yoga and Vedanta, which we are discussing, are to be understood, are to be grasped through proper practice and not merely through ideation. The system should experience that. Then these conclusions they are sparkling truths of the highest intelligence. You will understand that. That is why this particular literature, the Upanishads, it is the most precious part of our spiritual heritage. And only he will understand it who will understand it through sadhana, who will know it. These are the most obvious facts about your own life. You see here, this is a very beautiful saying in the Chandogya Upanishad. The vast and infinite is blissful. Bhumaiva sukham. Na alpe sukham asti. Which means there is no joy in the small and the meager. In the alpa, there is no joy. In the vast, in the infinite one. And only one thing is infinite. You know what it is. It is consciousness. There alone lies joy. This is what he's saying. Small bits of reflected joy in the mind should not be equated with this level of bliss. So that is why they are making this distinction. And if you read the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there you will see there is a beautiful dialogue between the sage Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. It is called Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvad, where he teaches his wife the nature of love, the nature of happiness, how an object becomes dear to a person. It's a very beautiful dialogue. There he tells her very clearly, Nava are patyu kamaya pati priyo bhavati, atmanastu kamaya pati priyo bhavati. Nava are sarvam kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. which means nothing is dear for its own sake. It is dear when it reflects the highest. A person becomes dear to you not because he is that particular person, but if he reflects consciousness, the highest principle of life, then he at once becomes dear to you. And this bond is unbreakable, isn't it? So one who manifests the highest ideal will become the person most dear to you. This is the teaching he is giving. That is why things become dear to us to the extent they are able to reflect the highest principle of life, the highest principle of consciousness. To that extent they will become dear to us. So you see what a profound teaching. Yajnavalkya actually was at a point when he renounced the world for the sake of austerities, and so he imparted this teaching to his wife Maitreyi, that please understand the value of this spiritual research. So the ultimate freedom, the ultimate joy, bliss, and everything has been traced to this experience of Brahman, pure consciousness, which is your own true being, which resides in you as the Atman. This knowledge is that is why it was part and parcel of education. It is not to be delegated to some particular institute, to some particular form of discipline, to some particular religion. No, it is a science in itself. It is the science of consciousness. It is the science of happiness. It is the true nature of our own being. So this is what has been encapsulated in the Upanishads. It is a completely impersonal science and technology in itself. We consider Vedanta to be the science of consciousness and yoga to be the technology, the method which takes you into the science of consciousness. So if you can grasp it like that, anybody can do it. It is for each and everybody, and without borders and without boundaries. See, Bhagavad-Gita on happiness has also been covered here. In the Bhagavad-Gita, you will see Bhagavad-Gita is actually the essence of the Upanishadic literature. It is mentioned in the Bhagavad-Gita itself that to the extent we are able to digest the Gita, to that extent even Upanishadic thought becomes very clear, because it is the essence of the Upanishads. And in the Bhagavad-Gita, there are described 3 types of happiness available to the human experience. See, if you check your own life and see, you will see how valuable this point is, how valid this knowledge is. First of all, Krishna is telling Arjuna about the sattvic form of happiness. Its characteristics are, it brings joy to the soul and intellect through tranquility by control of senses and mind. Its effects are, it may appear like poison at first because it involves great discipline, but it is like nectar at the end. And it leads to long-term satisfaction. This is the conclusion, the final effect. So isn't sattvic joy like that? If you discipline yourself, the body-mind complex, it will yield a certain amount of sattva. And this itself, in the Bhagavad-Gita, how beautifully this level of joy has been described. Sukhamatyantikam yattad buddhigrahyam atindriyam. Which means it is graspable by your intellect, this joy. But beyond your senses, it is not sense-based joy. So it is not object-based. It is the nature of the sattvic mind to radiate joy by itself. So this is the highest point of joy that we must aim at. And the second type of joy available is the Rajasik joy, which ensures from contact of the senses with sense objects. So this is what people normally call joy or pleasure. So it is like nectar at first, but poison at the end. This is how it is described in the Bhagavad-Gita. It appears to be very nice in the beginning, but it gradually leads you into frustration. And the conclusion is, it leads to short-term, insufficient satisfaction. Something to meddle with, that's all. But totally unsatisfactory at the end. And the third form, the tamasic kind of joy, the third type of joy, it is that joy which is born of tamas. It only stupefies and destroys. but it may appear very attractive, It is called prayas, the joy born of pleasure. So the Bhagavad-Gita also sounds a warning when it is describing Rajasik joy. It says, Krishna says that Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate. All the joy born of contact with the senses. It is the womb of dukkha. That is the womb of sorrow. You require a sensitive soul to understand this. And tamasic joy all the more. It will only stupefy and destroy because it is born of indolence and obstinacy. I told you, when you don't get real bliss, you settle for pleasure. And the conclusion is, it leads to depression. It appears as joy, but it only leads to depression. So check and see in your own life if this is true or not. The implications of this study are, happiness depends on the state of your mind because your mind reflects the joy of the Atman. A pure sattvic mind is always happy with or without objects. See, isn't this a great state, tell me? You are always blooming with joy, whether there are the right objects in your life or not. So this is the aim of human life, to become independent of objects, to become independent of relationships and people. So you can have whomever you want in your life, but your joy is not dependent on that person, because that person has his own will. If your joy was dependent on any person, then you are a slave to that person. So this definitely cannot be called joy, isn't it? So the implications are very, very deep. For every state, there is a degree of associated happiness. To maximize your happiness, clarity and intensity of the state of your mind is required. That is why, again, sadhana and transcending mind through yoga gives the highest happiness. Gita again and again will tell you this, that when you transcend the mind yogically through practice, that will lead to the highest bliss. But mental joy also, the joy of the mind also can be improved, greatly enhanced by bringing clarity there. And if the mind is clear, it will reflect the inner joy much better. So keeping a pure mind is the gateway to a good life. Basically, we must understand this. And this is part and parcel of education. A certain amount of discipline in life will only augment your vital energies. It will bring bigger chunks of happiness into your life. What are you worried about? I don't understand the modern concepts like FOMO and all that, fear of missing out the fun and all that. Because if you give in to just some form of small excitement, you will lose the bigger chunk of joy available to you. Rather, deepen your life, deepen your affection, deepen your commitment, and you will see bliss will only blossom in your life. Yes, you must also know the obstacles to happiness here. Please watch this slide. The very first obstacle to happiness, which goes unnoticed, is the alienation of the mind from its source, is the primary cause for depression. You will not find this even in modern neuroscience circles. What does this mean? Alienation of mind from its source. So you will find this as a recurring theme in our scriptures. In the Bhagavad-Gita, in so many places, Sri Krishna tells Arjun, I can give you a sample. He says, Nasti buddhir ayuktasya, nacha yuktasya bhavana, nacha abhavayata shanti, ashantasya kuta sukham. Which means even your buddhi will not develop without the touch with the soul. Ayuktasya nasti buddhi, nacha yuktasya bhavana. Even his thought currents will not be stable and good if he is not in touch with his soul. And what to speak of other things? And so how will he have peace? One who doesn't have the right bhavana, how can he have shanti? Ashantasya kuta sukham. One who has no peace, how can he have joy, anand? So you see, our actual existential reality has been very well portrayed in the Bhagavad-Gita. Alienation of the mind from its source, when you don't touch the core of consciousness and make the mind fully conscious as a result, you will suffer from different degrees of depression all through life, no matter how much positivity you try to bring into your life from the outside. This is the normal law of spiritual psychology, contemplative psychology, that the mind should reach its source, touch its source, remain in touch with its source. This is the number one cause for feeling alienated, feeling depressed, and having everything in life, yet not being able to remain happy and blissful. So many celebrities commit suicide, or they can lead very depressive lives. For this reason, you have not allowed awareness to come to the forefront. You are busy with some silly thought. How much happiness can it bring you? Getting fed up with life is all due to this. The second obstacle to happiness is our emotional insecurities. So you see, this is the great challenge for our young people today, because when you play with cultural values, the only thing it will result in is emotional insecurity. The mind is filled with fear, anxiety. It has unnecessary worries and even necessary worries. It is closed to any form of positivity. It is all due to playing with relationships, playing with cultural standards. So the mind enters an unforgiving mode as a result. That is why I always told you, relationships should be committed, pure. And if you play with your emotions and the emotions of others, it will result in emotional insecurity for yourself. You are closing the gate for happiness, for some cheap short-term pleasure. Don't do it. The third point, the third obstacle to your happiness is mind conditioned into negativity. When you keep taking in negative stuff, all kinds of violent things, and the mind gradually gets conditioned into negativity. So that leads to worries, anxieties, which you can't control. You see, you just can't stop mind after some time. So it will lead to a lot of negativity. It is a straight obstacle to happiness. That is why a clean life, a disciplined, regulated life, all these things go together, please understand. And part and parcel of a good life. Then you have the perfectionist. Everybody has told you to be a perfectionist at whatever you do. Yes, that is the mandate. That is natural. But if you are being too particular about something which is not, where it is not necessary, too much expectation to be perfect, then again, you will enter into negative states, because you will become a big fault finder. Anybody who does not reach your level of perfection, you will poke at that person. You must be perfect, no doubt about it. But in things of everyday life, where that level of perfection is not required, you must also learn to relax and accept. In the ethical challenges of life, be perfect. Everywhere else, you must be able to make space for all types of minds. So this is another important point. People insist on perfection where it is not required, and where they really have to maintain themselves in a perfect mode, they compromise on that. So this leads to a lot of lopsided development in their lives. Then social comparisons, jealousy, inferiority, small-mindedness, narrowness, all this can remove happiness from your life. This is pretty obvious, so I don't have to explain it. Then the materialist, great materialism, judging everything only by the pleasure it provides you, is one of the greatest causes of unhappiness in your life. If you judge everything by the pleasure standard, then the most important things in your life you will miss. The most beautiful things you will lose. Pleasure is not happiness. Pleasure is a very crooked, perverted form of joy, which is very short term and not at all fulfilling. It doesn't complete you. So understanding this and moving away from a purely materialistic philosophy of life is important. Then there are the maximizers. They are the simple greedy people, They want more even when satisfied. Simply hoarding and accumulating without understanding its value to your inner being. So this type also suffers from a lot of negativity. They are also unable to enjoy the present moment. There are people like that who are so restless, they will not stand in the present. So restlessness, please remember, removes your vital energies. And it will obviously drive you towards negativity. So developing a calm attitude in life, a very stable mind, this naturally will contribute to your happiness. Then the absence of gratitude in life. This is another big obstacle to happiness. There are so many blessings and bounties in our life. Check and see to what extent you have been thankful and grateful for them. If you have no gratitude to those who have made your life, to the society that has contributed to your life, then how can happiness enter your mind? Happiness comes with gratitude. Please remember. So on an everyday basis, be grateful, be thankful, be positive in your approach to others. If you are negative, condemning, critical, you only lose happiness, that is all. Your personality will become dark. So you see, all these are factors, obstacles to your happiness. And remember, catching stress is very easy. Catching negativity is very easy. You don't even have to be in the same room to catch someone's stress. It is transmittable by social media, email, text, and emotions are contagious online. So your exposures, what you indulge in, all that matters. A general life regulation, a clean, pure life is required if you want higher degrees of happiness. And always remember this in the background, that a self-alienated mind, and the capital S I mean there, self-alienated, which is not in touch with its source, will remain unhappy no matter how positive its content. No matter how positive the content of the mind, still if it is not in touch with its source, it will remain it cannot touch complete happiness. And this is the core cause for unhappiness. Here you have the neurophysiology of emotion. I want you to understand this a bit before we conclude this entire study of happiness. See, today's neuroscience, it has contributed so much to our welfare. It will give you all these chemicals for your happiness. Today we have reduced emotions to brain chemistry, neurochemistry. So you have dopamine, serotonin, and all these chemicals which are responsible when they are released into your bloodstream, you experience happiness. This is what neuroscience will tell you. But please remember this. Happiness is primarily a state of your mind. When you are happy, in your blood, these chemicals get released. But primarily, how do you experience happiness? As a buoyancy, as a lightness in your mind, as a happiness in your thoughts. Your thoughts are closer to you than anything else. So an injection of these chemicals is not going to make you happy. Please remember. You have to be happy for these chemicals to be present in your bloodstream. And emotions trigger the release of chemicals and hormones. So how you handle your emotion and your thought is what matters primarily. The bliss chemicals are called endorphins, and blessing, they all come from the same root, and the prefrontal cortex is loaded with opiate receptors. Yes, all this is true. But remember, your emotions you generate through your thought, through what and where and how you have invested your vital energy. The entire thing is in your hands. The reins are in your hands. And it is your emotions that trigger the chemicals and hormones in your system. mind powerfully affects body and brain. You create your chemicals through your mind power, through your thoughts. So how much care you must take of your thinking faculty, your feeling faculty, your willing faculty, and how much do we invest in this? Hardly. That is why today everybody is wanting the science of happiness. We have understood at least this much, that the self-management is the most important thing. On a regular basis, learn to be grateful, thankful, prayerful, appreciative, and positive. If you do this on a regular basis, you will maintain a fair level of positivity, positive effect in your mind, and then you will understand the significance of this study of happiness. It is a very deep level study based on sadhana. If you at least maintain this much positive effect, then you will be able to yourself uncover the deeper insights into happiness. And this is vital to your development in life. So we will end this series here. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.